get ready to dim the lights and lock your doors. Friday Night Frights is here to haunt your weekend. Every Friday night, we bring you spine-chilling tales of the macabre, the mysterious, and the downright terrifying. From cursed artifacts to shadowy creatures lurking in the dark, these stories will keep you on the edge of your seat long after the episode ends. Are you brave enough to listen? Tune in and be sure to subscribe to our channel for more eerie episodes. We have two stories for you tonight, both by Silas Grimm. We have The Stone That Bleeds and Night Chant. So, grab a cup of something yummy, sit back and relax, and enjoy the stories. Our first one tonight is Night Chant. Darren Hall arrived in Sunset Mesa on a dusty afternoon, the sky a scorched blue canvas over miles of parched earth. He was a journalist drawn by rumors of unexplainable late-night chants that echoed through canyons like ghostly choirs. Locals spoke of these sounds only in hushed tones, glancing over their shoulders as though the desert wind might overhear. Darren, a skeptic at heart, was determined to uncover a perfectly rational explanation, some quirk of acoustics, perhaps, or a wind tunnel phenomenon. But from the moment he rolled into town, an ominous undercurrent seized his thoughts. Sunset Mesa wasn't much more than a few buildings clustered around a single paved road that ended abruptly as the desert resumed its reign. A battered gas station, a diner whose neon sign flickered open, and a line of sun-bleached houses comprised most of it. Darren parked near the diner, dust swirling around his tires. As he stepped out, he tasted grit on his tongue. Heat radiated from the asphalt, warping the air in shimmering waves. Inside the diner, a bored waitress with sunburned cheeks eyed him from behind the counter. He introduced himself as a freelance reporter. She gave her name, Rosie, then gestured at the single-page menu. The diner was empty save for an old man hunched in a corner booth, sipping coffee. Darren decided to start with the old man, who gazed at him through milky eyes. "You're here about the chant," he said in a gravelly voice, as if reading Darren's mind. Darren nodded, cautious. "I've heard there's a strange sound out in the canyons. Happens after midnight." The old man, whose name was Jonah, set his mug down. "Comes from the wind, some say. Others claim it's a spirit. It's been around longer than this town. My father heard it when he was a boy, but it's stronger now." His gaze flicked to the diner window, looking toward the desert like it might breathe shadows even in daylight. "Don't go searching for it," he warned. "People vanish out there. You might not come back." It was precisely the kind of cryptic warning that fueled Darren's curiosity. He offered to buy Jonah another coffee if he'd elaborate. The old man sighed. "They say there's an ancient shrine in the canyons, a place carved into the rock centuries ago, long abandoned, or so we thought. But around midnight, the wind channels through that shrine, forming voices that chant in some forgotten language. At least, that's the legend." Darren couldn't contain a skeptical smile, though he kept it polite. He thanked Jonah, paid for a slice of pie, and headed back outside. The sun was sinking over the horizon, painting the sky in violent orange. He checked into a modest motel on the edge of town, a rickety place with peeling paint and a sagging porch. His plan was simple: rest until close to midnight, then drive out to the canyons. Night descended with a sudden finality. The desert wind picked up, rattling the motel's windows. At 11:30, Darren loaded his camera, audio recorder, and flashlight into his Jeep. The map Jonah had drawn led him onto a winding dirt track outside town. A thin moon offered sparse illumination. Occasionally, Darren glimpsed towering rock walls on either side. Dust kicked up under his headlights, swirling like restless spirits. At 12:08, he killed the engine. Nothing but silence pressed in, so absolute that his heartbeat sounded deafening in his ears. He began walking, guided by the faint glow of his flashlight. The canyon floor felt eerily still. Then a whisper of sound drifted through the darkness, just at the edge of hearing, a distant, undulating chorus. Darren's pulse quickened. He followed the noise, stepping around jagged rocks and brittle sagebrush. As he pressed on, the chant grew more defined, though its source was elusive. Voices echoed off canyon walls, folding back on themselves until direction became meaningless. The language was indecipherable, full of breathy syllables and low, throbbing tones. Darren's recorder blinked, capturing every eerie note. He felt a tingling in his scalp, a mix of excitement and dread. The stories were true. The desert wind carried a chorus of impossible voices. Rounding a bend, he found a hollow in the canyon wall, a crude arch opening to a chamber carved into the sandstone. Faded symbols lined its entrance, shapes reminiscent of serpents and swirling gusts. Inside, the chanting sounded closer, as though funneled by the ancient architecture. Darren's flashlight beam flickered across the rocky interior, revealing a central stone dais. He swallowed. Somehow the place felt alive with an unsettling energy. Each breath of air resonating in a circular pattern, magnifying the chant. He stepped inside, heart hammering. The chanting enveloped him, no longer faint, but immediate, voices overlapping in disharmony. His flashlight revealed crude pictographs on the walls, figures bowing before a towering shape with elongated limbs, the arms outspread like wings. Another panel showed what looked like swirling lines emanating from the figure's mouth, passing over kneeling worshippers. Goosebumps prickled Darren's skin despite the oppressive heat. Then, silence. The wind died in an instant, as though cut off. Darren held his breath, straining to hear. His flashlight faltered, blinking once, then twice. Darkness swelled. Somewhere nearby, a deep, rasping exhale disturbed the stillness. He whirled around, shining the beam in frantic arcs. Nothing, but the feeling of a presence weighed on him, like being watched through a veil. A cold gust rushed into the chamber, carrying a single droning note that pulsed in Darren's ears. It vibrated in his chest, making him stagger. Fear crawled up his spine. That was no simple wind. The entity behind the chanting was here, intangible but real, and it was waking up. With trembling fingers, Darren reached for his camera, snapping photos of the shrine. In each flash, he thought he glimpsed a shifting form against the wall, tall, distorted, and hungry. His mouth went dry. He had come seeking a story about odd acoustics, but he found something older, something that craved more than curiosity. He stumbled out of the shrine, adrenaline spiking. The chant resumed, swirling overhead, surging in intensity. It felt as though the desert itself had come alive, whispering ancient secrets. Darren hurried back to his jeep, fighting the wind that buffeted him from all sides. Climbing into the driver's seat, he hit the ignition. The engine coughed, struggled, then roared to life. He peeled away, dust trailing behind him. Even then, the chanting loomed in the rearview mirror, echoing through his mind. He spent the night tossing in his motel bed, replaying the images he'd captured. Each photo of the shrine looked normal at first glance. Sandstone walls, petroglyphs, but in the corner, faint threads of shadow seemed to coil. By sunrise, he had decided to contact the local sheriff, a man named Walker. Perhaps the authorities could investigate the shrine. Darren showed him the pictures. Sheriff Walker shrugged. Tourists go snooping in the canyons every so often. They come back spooked by the wind. But you say you heard actual voices? Darren's voice shook slightly. Yes, chanting, some language I've never heard. And something was inside that shrine. It felt hungry. He half expected the sheriff to scoff. Instead, Walker frowned. You sound like old Jonah. He's told me tales about an ancient power sleeping beneath these canyons. Says it's awakened by human fear. The sheriff looked uneasy, drumming his fingers on the desk. Look, if anything breaks the law, we'll handle it. But what you're describing is, well, beyond me. Darren left unsatisfied. Fear tugged at his gut, but he couldn't resist the lure of a bigger story. That night, the chanting was louder. He heard it right outside his motel window, though the canyon lay miles away. The wind battered the walls, forming half-words at the edges of hearing. Peering outside, he saw nothing but swirling sand, yet his heart pounded, certain something lurked just beyond the darkness. Over the next few evenings, the entire town began to experience odd phenomena. Windows rattled with unnatural force. Some residents heard the chanting in their own backyards, a spectral choir penetrating doors and walls. Livestock went missing from a ranch on the outskirts. A rancher claimed to have found animal tracks elongated and twisted, as if they changed shape mid-stride. Rumors spread that an ancient entity was roaming the desert. Darren noticed the effect on people. They looked haggard, plagued by nightmares. He, too, suffered vivid dreams of a tall, shifting silhouette with streaming hair like desert dunes. It chanted in a low voice, drawing close to his bed. Each time he awoke, sweat-soaked, certain it had just been in the room. One midnight, he resolved to confront the shrine again, hoping for answers. He drove alone, ignoring the trembling in his limbs. The chanting reached him before he even exited the jeep. It rolled through the canyon in crescendos, beckoning like a siren's call. Darren crept toward the shrine, guided by a faint glow that flickered inside. He entered and found the dais softly illuminated by an otherworldly light, though no obvious source. The stone walls seemed to ripple as if shadows danced across them. His footsteps echoed. When he reached the center, the chanting swelled around him, a swirl of voices that reverberated in his bones. The wind whipped at his hair. He shouted into the void, "What do you want?" For a moment, everything halted. The chanting, the wind, even the flickering shadows. A chilling voice hissed in his mind, "Fear. We feed on your fear." Darren gasped, knees threatening to buckle. He realized that every terrified person in Sunset Mesa, every anxious night, was a banquet for the things sleeping here. Their dread gave it strength. A phantom shape materialized, tall as the cavern's ceiling, arms outspread. Its features were hazy, a swirling blend of starlight and sand. The chanting resumed, so loud it felt like a physical blow. Darren fumbled for his flashlight, shining it on the figure. Light fractured across it, exposing glimmering particles that churned in a vaguely humanoid form. The creature let out a shriek, its essence shifting in agitation. Darren realized the creature, or perhaps multiple entities, were tethered to the shrine's architecture. The wind funneling through the canyon carried their voices, but to fully awaken, they needed darkness and terror. Summoning what courage he had left, Darren reached into his pocket for his phone, intending to record a final testament. But the creature lunged, and a gust of wind tore the device from his hand. He staggered backward, heart hammering. The exit lay behind him, but it was blocked by swirling sand, forming a living curtain. The chanting hammered his skull. He felt his sanity fray. Then, in a moment of desperation, he turned his flashlight to full power, sweeping the beam wildly. The bright glare seemed to disrupt the chanting for a second. The swirling curtain parted. He sprinted through, lungs burning as he escaped the shrine. Outside, the desert roared with unnatural winds. Dark shapes flickered at the edges of his vision, hungry forms conjured by every fearful thought. Darren forced himself into the jeep, slamming the door. The engine roared as he tore away from that accursed place. Back in Sunset Mesa, he found the streets deserted. Doors and windows were shut tight. The chanting rode the air, swirling above the rooftops. He realized that the horror had spread beyond the canyon, taking root wherever dread thrived. People cowered inside their homes, fueling the entity's power with raw terror. Darren sped out of town, ignoring the speed limit. The chanting followed, a spectral roar chasing him along the highway. He kept driving until the sun broke over the horizon. Only when daylight flooded the world did the voices fade. He pulled over, trembling, and watched the desert shimmer under the morning light. He never returned to Sunset Mesa. He filed a report with his editor about a natural acoustic phenomenon, leaving out the worst details. Yet nightmares continued to plague him. In his dreams, the chanting always rose from the desert at night, calling to him across endless dunes. Sometimes he'd wake to an echo in his bedroom, a faint whisper that made him check the dark corners. Rumors claim Sunset Mesa is nearly abandoned now. Some say the wind still carries chanting through the canyons, an endless night song hungering for more fear. For Darren, the memory is enough. Those ancient walls and that shifting shape feeding on human dread. He wishes he could forget the night chant, but it has lodged in his mind like a splinter, reminding him that some hungers in the desert can never be fully silenced, and that fear, once awakened, becomes a feast no walls can keep out. Our next story is called The Stone That Bleeds. When the heavy rains subsided, the landslide that ravaged the eastern slope of Eagle's Peak left a deep, jagged scar in the mountainside. Fallen boulders and torn tree roots blocked the main road. The townspeople rallied to clear the debris, only to discover something unusual just beyond the wreckage, a gaping fissure that opened into a previously hidden crypt. The entrance, a dark maw of carved stone, beckoned like a secret begging to be revealed. Most folks in Braxton's Hollow were simple farmers or tradesmen, not prone to superstition, but gossip traveled quickly. Before long, a small group gathered at the base of Eagle's Peak, curiosity piqued by rumors of hidden treasure. Among them stood Mason Fields, a local historian with a keen interest in ancient artifacts, and Gabriel Owens, an archaeologist who happened to be visiting family in town. They stepped carefully into the newly exposed passage, the air stagnant and oddly cold. Their flashlights caught glimpses of rough-hewn walls decorated with faded symbols. A lingering tang of earth and dampness filled their lungs. Deeper inside, the corridor opened onto a modest chamber with a ceiling supported by crumbling pillars. At the center lay a massive stone slab, partially embedded in the floor, so large it dwarfed the rest of the crypt. It was rectangular and intricately carved along its edges. The designs featured serpentine figures and strange geometric patterns. After circling it, Gabrielle knelt to brush away a layer of grit with her gloved hand. The stone was smooth, almost polished. Beneath the dust, the carvings were more elaborate than she had expected, twisting shapes that resembled coiling vines, each line meeting in symmetrical knots. Mason noticed something dark on the slab's corner. He knelt beside her, shining his flashlight. At first, it looked like a crusted stain, perhaps old water damage or rust, but the color was too deep, a blackish brown unlike any mineral deposit he'd seen. Then, in a moment that made his pulse jump, he saw it shift. The stain seemed wet, almost oily. He reached out to touch it, ignoring Gabrielle's warning to wait. The instant his fingertips grazed the stone, he felt a strange warmth. Then a thick, tar-like fluid oozed from the surface, trailing across the carving's grooves. Mason jerked back, alarmed. A hush fell in the chamber, all eyes fixed on the slow trickle of dark liquid. Gabrielle used a rag to blot a sample. It felt unnervingly viscous. The fluid had an iron tang, reminiscent of blood, and left a foul stain on the cloth. Word spread fast. Within a day, more townspeople, including the local mayor and a handful of self-proclaimed treasure hunters, arrived to see the bleeding stone. No one could explain it. Some hypothesized a natural phenomenon, maybe pressurized mineral deposits reacting with the air. Others muttered more ominous theories about curses and ancient rituals. Meanwhile, Mason and Gabriella arranged to test the liquid's properties, hoping science would shed light on the bizarre find. They brought the sample to an improvised lab in the back room of the local library. Each attempt to analyze it yielded contradictory results. It partially resembled human blood, but with unknown organic compounds. Under the microscope, it appeared alive in a way neither expected, as if the cells swirled with intention. Late one evening, Gabrielle noticed the sealed vial had collected a fresh streak along its interior, like the liquid was trying to escape. Across town, the stone slab began drawing more visitors. Reckless thrill-seekers laid hands on it, challenging one another to test their bravery. Every touch coaxed more of that dark fluid from the carvings. Some people joked it was just a weird tourist attraction. Others felt unsettled but couldn't articulate why. A few nights later, that sense of dread proved well-founded. A group of teenagers climbed into the crypt by lantern light, daring each other to see who could keep a hand on the stone the longest. Their shouts echoed off the damp walls, but soon those echoes were drowned out by a shriek. One of the teens staggered backward, eyes wide, stammering about something moving under his hand. The stone had grown hot, he said, like a heartbeat pulsing just beneath the surface. The dark fluid seeped faster, dripping onto the crypt floor. Panicked, they ran from the chamber. Later, a search party found one boy still missing. They discovered his flashlight near the slab, flickering feebly. Drag marks ran through the sticky black residue, leading deeper into an unlit passage. But the boy was nowhere to be found, and the footprints stopped abruptly, as if he'd been pulled into the darkness. Terror seized Braxton's Hollow. The mayor tried to seal off the crypt, warning the curious to stay away. But local rumor insisted the missing boy was only the first victim. Mason and Gabrielle realized that Each time someone touched the stone, the fluid's flow increased, as did the sense of malevolence in the chamber. They believed something was awakening, a guardian perhaps, some force that refused to let anyone breach the secret beneath that slab. Mason recalled reading about ancient cultures that buried guardians with their treasures, spirits bound to protect sacred tombs. The notion sounded far-fetched, yet, after witnessing the bizarre properties of the black fluid, it no longer felt impossible. Driven by the fear of more disappearances, Gabrielle and Mason decided that they had to uncover what the slab concealed. If they could pry it open safely, maybe they would find answers, or a way to stop the eerie phenomenon. Under the mayor's reluctant consent, they assembled a small team, 2 strong volunteers to lift the slab with heavy equipment, and a local spiritualist named Lydia, who claimed she could sense presences from beyond. They arrived at dawn, carrying a portable generator, arc lamps, pry bars, and rope. The crypt's silence was thick, broken only by the hum of the generator as bright light spilled across the chamber. A sense of foreboding pressed in on them. The stone slab gleamed in the harsh illumination, lines of dark fluid already congealed along its edges. Lydia paced around the perimeter, eyes half closed. She muttered that the stone was a living threshold, sealed by an oath older than any local legend. Something dormant lay beneath it, bound by blood or sacrifice. Her words made the volunteers exchange uneasy glances. Even Mason, who preferred logical explanations, couldn't dismiss the dread chewing at his nerves. They attached hooks to the slab's sides, planning to use a winch to lift it. But the moment metal scraped stone, a deep groan reverberated through the crypt. It sounded like distant thunder, or the growl of some enormous creature stirring from slumber. The black fluid erupted in fresh rivulets, dripping faster than ever. As they began to hoist the slab, the overhead lamps flickered. The atmosphere grew stifling, as if all the oxygen were siphoned away. Lydia screamed, pointing into a darkened corner. Something moved there, an indistinct shape, tall and sinuous, flickering like a shadow cast by flames. Its eyes, if it had any, were mere voids in the gloom. One of the volunteers lost his grip on the winch. The slab dropped an inch, reverberating through the floor. The figure in the corner advanced in a blur. With inhuman speed, it lunged for the unfortunate man, and he vanished without a sound. A strangled cry from the other volunteer signaled his terror. He scrambled away, leaving the equipment clattering. Gabriella's heart hammered. She shone her flashlight at the shape. The beam passed through its form as though it was made of dense smoke. A nauseating stench wafted through the crypt, reminiscent of decayed earth. The guardian, or whatever it was, now hovered near the stone, seemingly drawn by their intrusion. Mason grabbed a pry bar, though he doubted any physical weapon would matter. "We have to finish lifting it," he yelled. "There's no other way." Summoning courage, he and Gabriella seized the dangling ropes. The volunteer, eyes wild, helped them crank the winch. The stone slab inched upward, exposing a void beneath. The black fluid poured over their hands, thick and warm, making the ropes slick. Every inch of progress felt like a battle against some invisible force that tried to keep the slab sealed. Meanwhile, the guardian prowled at the edges of the light. In a fit of desperation, Lydia chanted something under her breath, a litany in a language no one else recognized. The moment they lifted the slab high enough to peer below, a gust of foul air rushed out. Gabriella peered inside. The space resembled a burial chamber. Bones lay in disarray. Streaks of black seeped along the walls, forming patterns that mirrored those on the slab's surface. She spotted a weathered stone coffin and, half submerged in the dust, an ancient chest, likely filled with relics or treasure. As soon as the chest came into view, the guardian hissed, a bone-rattling sound that vibrated through the chamber. Its shape expanded, swirling with the gloom. Lydia's chanting grew frantic, but the spirit swept toward her. She managed one final shriek before it consumed her silhouette. Mason and Gabrielle reeled back, realizing that removing the chest might unleash even greater wrath. They hesitated. With trembling hands, Mason said, "We have to leave it. We can't take it or even open it. That's what it's protecting." Gabrielle nodded, tears streaking her dust-covered face. "We have to seal it up again," she said. "If we do, maybe it'll remain trapped." The volunteer who remained stared at them, terror etched across his features, but he still helped. Slowly, painstakingly, they lowered the slab back into place. More black fluid welled, as if trying to cling to their hands, but they persevered. When the heavy stones settled onto the crypt floor, a palpable shift coursed through the air. The guardian's roar echoed like distant thunder, then faded into silence. The gloom in the corners lessened. The lamps burned steady once more. In that breathless moment, they realized 3 people were gone: the missing volunteer, Lydia, and the boy from earlier. No sign remained of them aside from dropped tools and faint smear marks in the black residue. Mason's eyes brimmed with sorrow. Gabrielle closed hers, stunned by the finality. They emerged from the crypt, faces ashen, warning the townspeople to stay clear. A plan was made to collapse the new entrance with dynamite, burying the entire site under rock and earth once more. Nobody balked at the drastic measure. The memory of the vanished victims was too fresh, and the terror of the guardian too real. Early the next morning, the authorities detonated charges that sent rubble cascading into the crypt. Dust clouded the sky in a choking haze. When it settled, the entrance was gone, replaced by crumpled debris. The stone slab lay buried beneath a mountain of shattered rock, sealed off from the world yet again. In the aftermath, many in Braxton's Hollow chose to forget, but rumors persisted of dark fluid seeping from cracks near Eagle's Peak when the weather turned cold, or of strange silhouettes lurking among the fallen boulders. Mason locked away his notes, unable to reconcile science with what he had witnessed. Gabrielle left town not long after, nightmares plaguing her dreams. Sometimes she woke in a sweat, recalling the guardian's hiss and the sight of that black blood smearing her gloves. Yet the slab remained buried, its occupant entombed, guarded by a timeless force that demanded blood for curiosity. No matter how deep mankind tried to bury it, the stone that bleeds would forever remain an ancient warning, one that any who dared to disturb would pay for in terror and loss. Thank you for listening to this week's Friday Night Frights stories, and I hope you'll join us next week for more fun tales of the macabre and the eerie. And until then, have a great week, everyone.